I nearly bled to death, and my own family refused to donate blood. Now that they need me, they come looking, but I've learned who's worth my time and who only shows up when it suits them. A few months ago, I had an accident that nearly sent me straight to meet St. Peter. No exaggeration, I was minutes away from not making it. It started in the dumbest way possible, as these things often do. I was moving some old stuff, vases gathering dust on a shelf. One slipped from my hands, tumbled down the stairs, and shattered on the landing. I didn't want to leave it there because it was dangerous, so I went down to clean up the pieces, not imagining I was about to live the worst day of my life. As I stepped onto the last stair, my leg gave out. I slipped on a small shard I hadn't seen and fell hard, not just a stumble but from one floor to another. The impact shook me to my core, knocking the wind out of me, my bones rattling like bells after a crash. Before I could even process the pain of the fall, I felt something worse. The base of one of the broken vases had lodged itself in my leg. The edge cut through like butter. At first I didn't want to look, but when I did, I saw blood gushing. Not a few drops, not a trickle, but a river of red pouring out fast. The pain was unbearable, but the speed of it was terrifying. I'd never seen anything like it. In seconds, my clothes were soaked, the floor was stained red, and I started feeling strange, light, like my body was slipping away. The pain of the fall took a back seat because what dominated was the sensation that I was fading. The world was darkening at the edges of my vision, like everything was shrinking. My wife appeared instantly, as if she'd sensed the disaster. When she saw me, she screamed my name in a tone that still echoes in my ears. She didn't freeze or waste time panicking. She called emergency services with a speed I wouldn't have managed in her place, ripped a piece of fabric, and tied an improvised tourniquet around my thigh. She pressed so hard I thought she'd break my leg. Later, the doctors told me that simple act kept me from bleeding out right there. A poorly done tourniquet can be useless or even dangerous, but hers was firm enough to buy me precious minutes. The ambulance arrived faster than I expected, though to me, it felt like eternal hours. I was cold, pale, my skin sticky with blood. They loaded me onto a stretcher while my wife kept repeating for me to hold on, to stay awake. The sirens wailed, but I barely heard them. I felt like I was floating, like my body weighed less, like letting go might be easier. But inside, I kept telling myself I couldn't leave her alone, that it wasn't time to give up. When we reached the hospital, it was chaos. Doctors and nurses moved fast, hooking me up to IVs, oxygen, applying pressure to the wound. I heard distant voices, technical terms, sharp orders. He's very unstable, lost too much blood, prepare for transfusion. That's when I realized it was worse than I thought. My leg was mangled, but the real issue was the hemorrhage. They stabilized me as best they could, and then came the part I'll never forget. A doctor approached my wife and, with the bluntness of someone who's said it 1,000 times, explained that they needed to replace the blood they were using, that the blood bank couldn't run dry, and if donors didn't show up, the other option was paying a sum we didn't have. It was like they were discussing an office transaction instead of life or death. My wife nodded, but I saw the desperation in her eyes, someone who didn't know where to turn for help. She stood there, phone in hand, trembling, calling my family one by one. First was my brother. Grudgingly, he said yes. I wasn't surprised, he and I always had a rocky relationship, but at least he agreed. Then came my cousins and uncles. That's when the real emotional blow hit. For as long as I can remember, I've never hesitated to help my family. I was the one who found jobs when someone was unemployed, lent money without expecting repayment, made connections so my cousins could land decent positions. For my uncle, my dad's brother, I got him a job when he was desperate. I did the same for his daughters when they had no opportunities. When he had a workplace accident and the company washed their hands of it, I was the one who found him legal help, putting in time and energy so he wouldn't end up on the street. I remember him looking me in the eyes and saying, "Son, if you ever need anything at all, just tell me. I'm so grateful, I'll never forget it." Those words echoed in my head as my wife called him. His response was a bucket of ice water. I'd love to help, but I'm scared of needles. I hope you understand." Just like that. No effort, no willingness. His supposed gratitude boiled down to a cheap excuse. It wasn't that he couldn't or that he was sick. Just, "I'm scared." It felt like a punch to the chest. I never expected repayment for the things I did. I didn't help to collect favors. But in that moment, when my life depended on a simple act, the ingratitude cut deeper than the vase in my leg. It was the hardest emotional blow of the whole ordeal, realizing the person who owed me the most, who had the most reason to step up, hid behind a childish excuse. The others weren't much better. Some didn't even answer. Others said they couldn't because they had work the next day, as if giving blood was a trip across the country. The reality hit me hard. A lifetime of giving, of supporting, and when it was my turn to receive, I was left alone. Meanwhile, I was on the stretcher, my mind fading in and out of clarity. I saw my wife crying in a corner, still making calls, and felt the real pain wasn't just in my gaping leg but in realizing my family wasn't the family I thought. In the end, a few stepped up. My brother, reluctantly. A cousin, after my wife practically begged for the bare minimum to get the transfusion and keep me alive. The doctor stabilized me, but I knew something beyond my body had broken. My trust, the idea that blood ties are stronger than anything. I survived, yes. But the experience showed me that in the most critical moment, not everyone shows who they claim to be. I had to learn it the hard way, with my life hanging by a thread and disappointment burning hotter than the wound. When I think about everything that happened after the accident, one thing I can't stop repeating is that I owe my life to my wife. Not just for the tourniquet she made at home, but for never leaving my side in the days that followed. While I was in a hospital bed fighting to survive, she was out there handling pressure, calls, paperwork, and even my family's indifference. If anyone was my backbone, it was her. I'll never forget that, and though I've told her every way I can, I don't think I'll ever fully repay her loyalty. Even when I was half-conscious at first, as I grew more lucid, I saw her exhausted, phone in hand, dealing with rejections, excuses, and awkward silences from people I thought were close. Despite it all, she didn't break. She kept going, found alternatives, and stood firm. My gratitude for her is infinite. And something else surprised me, giving me a bit of relief amidst the disappointment. I guess doing good without expecting anything in return sometimes pays off. Many neighbors, people who held me in high regard, heard about what happened and showed up at the hospital. They weren't family, had no obligation. Yet they came, asked what was needed, and organized with my wife to gather the blood I required. I still remember the image. My wife with a notebook, jotting down names as neighbor after neighbor offered to donate. Some did it with a calm smile, others nervously, but no one backed out. Seeing them there, waiting their turn in the donation room, stirred something I can't fully describe. It was like the scales tipped back toward hope. While my own blood family failed me, this other family, built through time and coexistence, was holding me up. The same happened with my wife's family. As soon as they heard, they sprang into action. No need to ask twice, no excuses. They came, donated, stayed by our side with a naturalness that moved me. To them, it was obvious they should be there because they saw me as family. That gesture meant more than they know, showing me that even if my last name wasn't enough, I wasn't alone. Thanks to that unexpected network, the blood was secured. The doctor stabilized me, treated the wound, and slowly I moved out of the danger zone. It was tough. Transfusions, dizziness, a fragility I'd never felt. But I made it. Weeks later, with a scar etched on my leg, I was discharged and went home. I couldn't move much, needed a cane at first, but being back under my roof was a gift. I thought the worst was over. Physically it was. But the emotional wounds didn't heal as easily. The worst came when I least expected it, just a week ago. I was at home, sitting in the living room, when someone knocked. I opened the door to find my uncle, the same one who told my wife he was scared of needles, the one who'd sworn lifelong gratitude. He came under the pretense of checking on me, seeing how I was. I wasn't warm, though the disappointment still burned inside. We talked about trivial things, how I was feeling, the cane I'd be using for a while, all in a seemingly normal tone. But I knew something was up. His visit wasn't random. I found out at the end when he stood to leave and in a rehearsed tone said, "I lost my job, can you help me find a little work?" I was stunned. The audacity was so brazen I had to take a deep breath to keep from exploding. This man, who couldn't give half a liter of blood when I was dying, was now asking for my help. The same one who'd promised to always be there for me stood in front of me like nothing had happened, like I still owed him. I didn't yell or lose my temper. I just looked him in the eyes and calmly said I wouldn't help him this time. That everyone has to face the consequences of their actions, and I'd learned my lesson. He got uncomfortable, searched for words but found none. And he left. The worst came after, when my family heard about my decision. Suddenly I was selfish, cold, ungrateful. According to them, I should keep helping because family is family. As if what happened in the hospital didn't matter. As if I hadn't been on the verge of death waiting for a gesture that never came. I was furious inside, screaming to myself, where were they when I was dying? Where was this family unity they're now demanding? No one had an answer. Because the truth is, you see who truly cares when you need them most. My uncle wasn't worth it. My family in general wasn't worth it. That episode marked a breaking point. Since then I've kept my distance. I don't hold an eternal grudge, but I no longer feel the urge to reach out or trust them. I realized you can break yourself into 1,000 pieces for family, and in the critical moment they won't even try. Instead, I've grown closer to my wife's family. They showed me they deserve the title of family. And to my neighbors, the ones who lined up at the hospital to donate blood. Since then, we've shared more moments together. Recently, we had a couple of barbecues at my house, inviting those who lent a hand. That's where the real brotherhood was, the warmth I expected from my own blood but found elsewhere. In the end, the accident left me with a scar on my leg and another on my heart. But it also opened my eyes. It showed me who's worth it and who isn't. And though it hurts to accept that my own family failed me, it gave me the chance to value those who were there even more. Today I'm grateful, not for the accident itself but for the lesson. Because I learned to distinguish between empty words and real actions. And because I understood that true family doesn't always share a last name but shows up in times of crisis.